So welcome to Aphasia and AAC Ideas and Resources. My name is Michelle Retzloff, and I am a consultant for Saltillo. My colleague Amanda Hettenhausen and I co-created this presentation and training, and we thank you for your time and joining us this evening. So we're going to go through a couple of slides here just to kind of get things kicked off. From some housekeeping information, there is two versions of GoTo training. There's a desktop view and there's a web view. So currently everyone is muted, and if you, when we all unmute, if you find yourself you're unmuted for some reason, technology happens, you want to click the green microphone to mute yourself again, just because of the audience that's here, and it cuts down on background noise, as many of us have discovered throughout this past year, being online a lot. There is an area to raise your hand. So that is circled in the purple for the web view, and for the desktop view, there is that little icon to raise your hand. So you would click that to raise your hand and ask that question. Another option is to go ahead and type a question into the chat window. The chat window is a little bit further below. You can expand it by hitting the plus and it expands. You can type in that message and then you can hit send, and then Brittany will be, looking at that chat window and responding. We'll see what the questions, if there are any, and dependent upon what they might be, we might hold them until the end of the training, or we might answer them right now or when that moment arises. And then there's also the material section. So the material section also can be expanded. There are 3 materials for tonight's training. They should also have been included in the email after you registered. We can also double check on that as well to see if those can be sent to you after in the follow-up email. But again, they are located in the materials section. And depending on which browser you're in, you might see something different. But feel free to chat us in that chat window. Okay, and then last but not least, this little orange button, you can collapse or expand the control panel. Just a couple more housekeeping information. You are all muted. We would love for you to download those materials in the materials section. Again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please chat those in the window. Your feedback survey will pop up immediately right after that course, and the proof of completion will be sent an hour after the class has ended. That tends to be a pretty common question for us, so it will get to you. It just takes some time for the system to register everything and that information to be sent out. I mentioned Brittany before. She is my colleague who helps to support the state of Indiana, and I believe a little portion of Ohio as well. So she is a fabulous consultant and will be helping to moderate the chat window. For our handouts today, there is the Aphasia and AAC Ideas and Resources. This isn't a traditional handout per se. It's not the slides that you're going to see. It won't be identical. It's more of a general guideline for you to make general notes, jot down some ideas, maybe a reference that you might want to look at a later date. We did try to include some of the highlight points within this handout, but again, it's not your standard traditional handout where it's just copies and pictures of the PowerPoint slides. And then another resource is the AAC resource for individuals with aphasia. That can also be found on the Saltillo.com website, but that is included in the materials section. Because this is an ASHA presentation, I need to disclose that this presentation will focus exclusively on Saltillo products and applications, and we will not include information regarding similar or related products and applications. Disclosures, I just put Brittany's name in here just so you're aware that she is part of PRC-Saltillo, but we are both employee owners of PRC-Saltillo. I forgot Amanda's name in here as well, so I apologize for that error, but myself, and I believe Brittany and Amanda are all ASHA members and ASHA SIG 12 members. At least I can speak for myself for being an ASHA SIG 12 member, so apologies for that. This course is for 1 or 0.10 ASHA CEUs. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off right now so we can focus on the material, and I look forward to connecting with you all towards the end of today's presentation. All right. Thanks, Brittany, for clarifying that. All right, for today's learning outcomes, we are hoping that at the end of today's presentation, you will be able to explain 2 ways of how to infuse high-tech AAC into implementation strategies that might benefit a person with aphasia here on out PWA. We hope that you are able to identify 2 examples of AAC resources that might benefit a person with aphasia. and describe 2 current research findings that support the use of high-tech AAC as a possible treatment option for a person with aphasia. Right. For our agenda today, we are going to provide an overview of both aphasia and AAC. We're going to take a look at what the research says. We're going to relate that to strategies and techniques that might be similar for no, low tech, and high tech. And we're also going to talk about some case studies, and then we'll wrap it up with the conclusion at the end. But right now, we're going to launch our first poll. We would like to see who is here today. So there should be a poll that will open up, and we love for you, for those that are here, to go ahead and participate if you kindly would. We'll give everyone just a couple of moments to fill that out. Thanks. All right. Brittany, there we go. There's the results there. Yeah, looks like we have a lot of other. Okay. Well, I am very intrigued by this. Excellent. A lot of inpatient, outpatient. We have some others that are working at the university or college level and caregivers. So thank you. This is a great, diverse audience. So I thank you for being here. Okay. Let's delve right on in. So let's start with your why. We all work in different settings. We live with different people. We experience different things. We work with different clients. So what's your why? What brought you to tonight's presentation or training? Personally, I've always been drawn to working with an adult population, and I've had a passion for AAC. So it got me thinking, where is AAC in our aphasia treatment? What prompted you to come to tonight's training? So when we think about the why, that gives us a solid starting point regarding what brought us here. For some of us, we're aware that aphasia and AAC have existed. But have we thought about how aphasia and AAC have intersected before, especially with aphasia treatment? Tonight, we're going to take a slightly different approach in how we viewed this interaction and intersection of these 2 areas, especially with the advancements of technology. So let's continue the conversation, or maybe begin to think about how we infuse AAC in our current aphasia treatment or supports. In order to do that, it would be great for us to have some general common terminology as we progress throughout the rest of this evening. When we think about aphasia, here's a very brief overview. But before we do that, I'd love to know where you think you would rate your knowledge about aphasia. So here's our second poll. So 1, not a lot of information or knowledge about aphasia. 5, I've read all the books, I've read all the research articles out there on it. Just a couple seconds here. Okay, great. So people feel pretty comfortable. Some are kind of in that middle. There's always room for growth, right? Always more things out there to learn about it. So when we think about aphasia, we know that it is an acquired language disorder typically caused by an injury that impacts the brain. We ultimately know that it impacts someone's ability to verbally communicate. However, when we think about aphasia, it impacts so many different areas just than verbal. It impacts someone's ability to read, someone's ability to write. It can impact someone's ability to comprehend what's spoken to them. This also might be accompanied by apraxia of speech or dysarthria, which makes that sounds and those speech just very garbled. When we think about how many millions of people are impacted by aphasia, the National Aphasia Association states that there's roughly 2 million people impacted by aphasia. But that number does not include caregivers. It does not include the communication partners, medical professionals, or anyone else with whom the person with aphasia interacts. So that means there's definitely more than 2 million people that are impacted by aphasia. So much so, when we think about aphasia, the WHO ICF model, or the World Health Organization, has said when we look at aphasia, it impacts body structure and function. It impacts activity and participation. It impacts environmental factors. It's impacting personal factors. And within those boxes, you can read a little bit more detail about what they have decided to include in these kind of sections. But really, if we simply want to put what aphasia impacts, we need to look at the whole person. What does the person with aphasia want to do? Do they want to FaceTime with their grandkids? Do they want to order takeout food? Maybe they need to ask for directions for how to get to their doctor's office. These are the important life events versus, say, our impairment level goals that someone might have written, choosing pictures or selecting specific items from a field of 4. When we're taking the whole person into account, that's how we're looking at how we can effectively help and treat aphasia. So thinking about what aphasia can impact, if you lost your ability to speak, what part or parts of your life would be impacted? In what way would those be impacted? And to what extent? Would you be able to type comments or questions in the chat window? Would you be able to ask someone to help with anything? Would you be able to order that food or maybe send a text message with words? Aphasia impacts so much. Feel free to chat anything in the window at any point in time. Comments, thoughts, feedback. So when we think about aphasia, there's a whole bunch of different approaches to how one might assist in restoring or compensating for that loss of communication. Typically, there tends to be 2 banks of treatment approaches. One of those is restorative, which we're helping to restore that person's natural speech and language abilities that they had prior to aphasia. And the other section is compensatory. So using strategies or tools to help maximize their current communication. But what's interesting is that aphasia is a complex disorder that defies straightforward, unitary intervention approach. Garrett, Lasker, and Fisher has said this. And when we think about how complex the disorder of aphasia is, and we then look at all of our different treatment options, we know that as therapists and as family members and care providers and everyone else on here who's experienced aphasia, you've probably seen one of these treatment options happening. This isn't a sequence of events. We don't, try community support integration and then do computer-based treatment and carry on down the road. We use a smattering of all of these treatment options kind of at the same time. And when we think about the use of AAC, this is where it would be under that multimodal treatment, which is why we have that border around that box. We have a wide variety of treatment options because not every individual is the same. We have to find a customized treatment approach for those who have aphasia. For today, again, we'll be focusing on that AAC or multimodal treatment. But regardless, we know that we need to assist, and when we think about restoring or compensatory strategies, there hasn't been a lot of overlap within these 2 restorative and compensatory banks of therapy. But more research is coming out, and they're finding that the use of AAC is kind of bridging this gap. It's actually helping to maximize communication. Fried, Oken, Buchelman, and Hux have said, regardless, the goal is to help maximize communication function, interaction, and participation in the natural environment. So when we think about AAC, we're going to take a little brief overview here. Where would you rate your knowledge of AAC? Just AAC in general. Everyone a couple moments here. Okay, 4. It's probably one of the reasons why you're all here, right? AAC, you're a little bit more familiar with that. Excellent. Kind of all over the board. This is great information to have. We're all over. Again, it's really great to have a wide variety of individuals who have various knowledge of AAC. So a couple more polls a little bit down the road. But before we get to that, when we think about AAC, just to start off with the definition so we all have that common terminology moving forward, ASHA refers to AAC as an area of research that's clinical and educational practice that compensates for temporary or permanent impairments. It's limiting activity, and it also restricts participation, especially for those individuals that have severe disorders of speech language production and comprehension. We know that AAC supports all different language domains, comprehension, production, written and spoken modes. Garrett and Lasker has said, AAC is more than just talking boxes and picture boards. It's a comprehensive collection of communication strategies that provide external support for people who cannot understand or generate message independently. They're saying AAC is something we shouldn't view as giving up hope. When we use AAC, it actually allows for an opportunity for someone to more independently re-engage in life. And it's not a last-ditch effort. So maybe it's time that we start to reframe how we actually view AAC with individuals who have aphasia. Okay, so I'm going to show a video here. I'm going to switch my audio. So I have to take my headphones out and plug in a different speaker. So just bear with me for 1 second while I get that loaded. Now we'll turn up the volume. Let me know if you would kindly in the chat window if I need to increase that. Okay, here we go.
I am using my iPad to talk with you. Please do not hang up.
Okay, Kathy, do you have your ID number?
My ID number.
Thank you. Kathy, you're living on 128th Street?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Kathy, what day are you looking for?
I'd like to schedule a ride for July. July 28th. I'd like to schedule a ride for July 28th.
Okay, and where to, Kathy?
Two o'clock.
You set an appointment at 2 o'clock?
Yes.
And where are you going to?
The TD Bank at 7317 120th Street in Delta.
Thank you. Are you taking your scooter?
I use a power wheelchair and stay in my wheelchair.
Thank you. And is anybody going with you?
I travel without an attendant.
Thank you. And return at what time?
Save on foods at 7015 120th Street in Delta, please.
And okay, so take us there and save on to go home?
Yeah.
At what time, Kathy?
4 o'clock.
Thank you. I'm just going to see what we have.
Okay.
It'll just be 1 moment. So Kathy, are you making your way from the TD Canada Trust to save on your own?
Yes, yes.
Okay. On Thursday, the 28th, from 128th Street, going to TD Canada Trust. On 120th, your pickup time, it is 1 to 1:30.
Okay.
And then a pickup from Savon on Scottsdale. On 120th, going back home, it is 4 to 4:30.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Kathy, anything else I can help you with?
Goodbye and thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bearing with me on that. When we about that video, what would this interaction look like if there wasn't any voice output? Would she be able to effectively create that appointment for pickup and drop off? What's the role of the communication partner in this interaction? What went into this to make this a successful communication interaction? If you have any thoughts, feedback, any observations that you saw, feel free to chat them in the window. We'll give everyone just a couple minutes to process that. Right. And does that voice output, oh my gosh, the patient's right? Absolutely. The advocacy statements, exactly. Wait, don't hang up. Do you think that they did this once in therapy and she knew what to do? Thinking about the scripting, the planning, all of this, the interactions that go along with that. Exactly. You've hit on the head there, Catherine. We're going to talk about customizations a little bit later. So we think about that. Our life is kind of scripted. So if we know some of those general scripts, we might be able to then reflect a page that, yes, might include us working to create that page or the communication partner to create that page. But ultimately, does that person become more independent long term? Exactly. Yeah, it can take some time. And we can't plan for everything, but thinking about what the voice output allowed her to do versus not having it. So just kind of a thought to kind of think of moving forward and just kind of get the brain flow thinking of some of these voice output options. Garrett, Lasker, and Fisher have said successful implementation of AAC requires instruction and guided practice. Communication partner training is an important part of AAC intervention for the person with aphasia. So when we're thinking about the person with aphasia, AAC should not rest solely on their shoulders. AAC, especially with the use of high-tech AAC, we have to involve that communication partner right from the beginning. And we'll talk more about that in regards to customizations as the presentation training continues. Okay, so kind of shifting gears a little bit. If we think about pictures, and I know this is blurry, this is from our manual that we have for one of our vocabulary files. If I had to guess, and you feel free to chat it out in the chat window as well, have you ever used pictures for those of you that are practicing therapists? Have you ever used pictures or maybe at home for some after therapy practice to help relay or have that person with aphasia either identify something, or have you used pictures to help them continue conversation? And if so, what does a picture provide? When we think about a picture, what does it provide the communication partner and the person with aphasia? Exactly, it provides them with all of this context. But what would happen if we added voice output around the picture? What if there were pre-programmed buttons that the person could touch? Would it continue or further a conversation versus just having the photo. When we're thinking about the use of AAC, the use of longer-term independence for whatever that might mean for that individual, does voice output become a big factor in determining what may or may not be helpful? So thinking about voice output, we talked about aphasia, we talked about AAC. What does the research actually have to say about this? This is our last poll. We thank you for humoring us with these polls. Curious to know, what do y'all think about your knowledge about AAC with a person with aphasia and using it with a person with aphasia? We appreciate your honesty in this. Okay. Interesting. I love that there's a dichotomy of like, we had really strong information and knowledge about AAC, but then when it comes to those who have aphasia, yeah, right. This is where a lot of us tend to fall. We're just not really sure what's out there. So let's take a look. What the research does say about the use of AAC, and this slide is specifically talking about general AAC, so low-tech AAC, using pictures, nothing that has voice output, mid-tech, so like a button when you touch it and it speaks, and then high-tech, something that's got a dynamic screen, voice output, the screen changes, things along those lines. So the combination of AAC, research says, oh my gosh, it's super important. It's a great bridge or a ramp. You'll hear this analogy a lot. It's a great compensatory and restorative strategy approach. It's effective with people with aphasia, TBI, and other neurodegenerative diseases. It is really helpful for conversational partners because they're reporting when they say, hey, when we use AAC, we're having more successful interactions. Think about the context that you all mentioned before that a picture provides. Think about what voice output potentially provides in addition to the picture. And then think about if you didn't even have the picture or voice output. Research is also saying that when we start to use AAC, we need to start the use of AAC with these populations soon and start it early. But let's break down research a little bit further. If we look at low-tech AAC and the use of that with persons with aphasia, research has said not only does it create a shared communication space, because it provides that context, it increases number of conversational turns. If we think about our individuals who have aphasia, how many of them stop speaking or stop speaking compared to what they used to? We want to have that interaction. If we think about communication, that is the spice of life. We want to interact with people most of the time. And because of that, it improves the interaction with unfamiliar partners. That unfamiliar partner has a context or reference in regards to what someone might be trying to convey. In addition to that, the use of low-tech AAC increases the ease of sharing information and understanding information. So what about high-tech AAC? It's interesting. Does pretty much the same thing, but we know that there are some differences with this. We know that when we use high-tech AAC for those who have aphasia, we have to customize those buttons. We have to make it unique to that individual. It can also be learned during structured tasks. And it doesn't really matter so much of what type of aphasia. It can definitely benefit a wide variety of persons with aphasia. And it should be considered a viable treatment option to support language recovery. Language recovery is huge. But why are we not seeing a lot of high-tech AAC in particular, or AAC, in practice with those with aphasia? So in therapy sessions, what's the holdup here? Well, naturally, people want to restore their original speech and language, and absolutely so. We also know that funding, when they encourage a plateau, when there's a plateau, they tend to cease services. We also know that clinicians generally lack experience and training in AAC, which is a whole topic within and of itself. But this is what the research is reporting. We also know that persons with aphasia and families are actually the ones who are typically seeking out AAC services on their own. And unfortunately, there has been a slower development of AAC strategies for persons with aphasia. So any researchers out there, there's definitely some areas of the topics that we would love to further our knowledge and find out what else might be going on. From 2018, Dr. Dietz, and her colleagues, I feel like this quote is just pretty much hits the nail on the head. When we think about using AAC, she says, this approach, however, requires a shift in how AAC treatment is implemented. With the goal of language recovery, treatment needs to focus on instructing the person with aphasia how to use AAC systems as a mechanism for self-cueing rather than a tool for replacing speaking. That shift in our mindset. If we're thinking of AAC as a support system, we're using it to self-cue the person with aphasia, and I would also add their communication partner to use the tool versus replacing speaking. So often people might say, well, great, Michelle, you have this information, you're presenting it to it, but how do we infuse this? How do we use this within our current strategies? So what we're going to do is we're going to focus and just kind of highlight on these 4 strategies and techniques. When we think about augmented input, it's a set of strategies in which the communication partner supplements their spoken words by gesturing, drawing, or writing down keywords. And this helps to support the comprehension and decrease frustration and communication breakdowns with the person with aphasia. So what are some of those examples? Just like the things we've been using with you. In those polls, those were Likert scales. Those are rating skills. It's a great way to get some general information right out of the gate. But what would happen if there's voice output? What would happen if this is a patient in a hospital or someone at their home and there was no voice output? Would their communication partner who's in another room, or if there is a nursing station, would they be able to effectively express their pain or how they're feeling to someone who's not right next to them? So thinking about that voice output. So if we were to do a Likert scale, this might be an option that one might use. We were in person, we would, have you kind of touch that Likert scale to express your opinion, things along those lines. So we could use a Likert scale to talk about the weather. I'm kind of so-so right now. It's very hot in Chicago. My allergies are not liking it. You could talk about the latest season of something, and that's where that information could be captured. We also want to make sure that we provide an option for no opinion or doesn't apply. Another opportunity to use augmented input would be for maps. One might be talking about where they might go for vacation. Someone might be talking about where they lived. And when we talk about information from our past, we like to share that typically with a lot of people. So when we think about a low-tech version, that's there. We have that. We're using photos. What would voice output potentially add? Would someone be able to error correct if they touched on a state and they heard the voice output from the device? Would it self-cue them to try a different state until they found the state that they needed? Are there going to be errors? Sure. But long term, would that potentially assist that person to become more intuitive or more independent for relaying that information? Okay. So here is another video. So I'm just going to toggle on my other speaker here. And I'm going to play, and I'm going to fast forward it to right about here. And this is a brief little video about how one might use maps to assist in conversation.
How was your trip? Wasn't there bad traffic? But there's so much construction. Came along handy. Yeah, it came along handy, but didn't you find that there's a ton of construction right around there? No, I guess they're all done. Okay, well, that's great then. Now there's just so much construction in Vancouver. Yeah, oh, you're going to show me where there's construction in Vancouver. Oh, Georgia, and I think that's that hotel they're building, the hotel they're building. Yep. A lot of money for that. Oh, so you're showing me some other places. No. So there's the hotel. Oh, you're seeing. Yep, you're seeing. Okay, the view. The view in the hotel. It's going to be a fabulous view. No wonder it's worth the money.
Similar to the previous video, about the partner and who is enacting a person with aphasia or a language disorder that's preventing them from speaking. How did that communicator partner use the map to augment comprehension? Or what other ways might you think of using the map to avoid communication breakdowns? And then when we think who would need to be trained for this to be used successfully? With all things related to therapy, it takes practice and repetition. Okay. All right. Look for any thoughts or comments in the chat window. Otherwise, I will continue on in the sake of time. Another strategy that is typically used is what we call, or what is referred to as, tagged yes or no questions. So essentially, you ask a yes or a no question and then tag it by using augmented input. So for example, one might do something along these lines, and I'll show my camera for this. I am from Green Bay, so I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek here. So when someone says, "Do you like the Green Bay Packers?" So I'm pausing and shaking my head, or no. So when we're using the tag yes, no questions, I'm going to hide my camera again, we can help supplement that communication. Well, what does that look like potentially on someone's communication system? If someone were to use the visual, we could help to customize that vocabulary file that would be unique to that individual. I might point to the beer and say, "Would you like the beer on your talker?" Yes. No. Would you like the tea on your talker? Yes or no. When we're thinking about getting that communication partner involved and the person with aphasia, we are helping to customize it. We're also training the communication partner for how to implement some of these strategies and techniques that we've typically done with low-tech AAC, and we're starting to transfer those same strategies and techniques onto high-tech AAC. Another strategy is written choice communication. So when we think about this, someone might, the communication partner may write down specific words that highlight a specific topic or a point of discussion. And typically, when we think about written choice, we have that paper there. You're very reliant upon the communication partner to write all of this stuff down. So some way that one might be able to kind of infuse this written choice communication on a high-tech system is through the use of a whiteboard. We have a whiteboard feature within some of our communication apps in regards to facilitating this strategy or technique. So one then would have the flexibility of using pre-programmed phrases or words, but they would also have the opportunity to draw something. A real example is I went to a family's home a couple of weeks ago, and the husband wanted to share with his wife his temperature. And he went to the whiteboard and wrote it down, and she said he's never been able to do that before. So when he has a traditional paper and pen, it just didn't happen. But for whatever reason, when we presented him with this whiteboard, he put his finger on that screen and he was able to communicate that information. Did the communication partner have to ask a question first? Yeah, she did. But because of that prompt and the communication partner's interaction, he was then able to relay this information because of this function. He didn't always use the whiteboard. After we continued our conversation, we went into the vocabulary file where we customized things where he could use a button that would say an entire sentence. So having the flexibility within a communication system that has voice output, but also maybe it doesn't, allows for kind of that comprehensive, maybe effective or efficient way to kind of have a whole bunch of stuff in one location to facilitate communication. Because sometimes we just don't know what strategies or techniques are going to be needed at that point in time. So where does one get started? Garrett and Lasker have come up with a clinical taxonomy for communication or communicator strategies or categories, excuse me. When we look at the partner-dependent communicators, that orange section, they have broken this down into emerging communicators, conversational choice communicators, and transitional communicators. The independent communicators of this green section below, and they have classified those into 3 different categories such as stored message communicators, generative communicators, and specific needs communicators. Moving down from partner dependent to independent communicators indicates that that person is gaining independence with their communication abilities. This is also kind of transferred onto an aphasia category of communicators checklist. So those things that we had talked about in the taxonomy in the slide before, you'll see that it's essentially broken down on this graphic. You'll see that there's skills and challenges that correspond with each communicator type. Give just a second to kind of look at that, and I'm going to show you a different version where a different group has kind of melded everything together. The Kaya group, the Communication Assistance for Youth and Adults in Vancouver, British Columbia, really started to intertwining, or they have been intertwining a lot of the research that's been out there with the use of AAC. They created, based off of Garrett Lasker and a whole bunch of other individuals' research, this form. We've numbered the columns at the top, 1 through 7. In section number 1 or column number 1 is where you will find the communicator type. Column number 2 and 3 is where you will see skills and challenges that one might exhibit associated with that communicator type. Column 4 are opportunities or skills required for AAC. Column 5 are assessment ideas. Column 6 are therapy ideas. And column 7 talks about AAC options. Is it even appropriate? Is it not? And some of those indicators that are located there. This, I have to say, I work with some fabulous speech pathologists in the Chicagoland area, and they have said that they will get referrals to do AAC evaluations. So in order to get more information from about the client before they see them, they might just be seeing them for the evaluation. They want more information before they have that evaluation session with the patient. They will send the referring speech pathologist or a family member or someone that they feel who made that referral to fill out some of these forms so that they're getting additional information to help them with that assessment. So looking at some case studies, what does this kind of look like? As far as manuals go, I have to say the manual that accompanies our communication journey aphasia file is quite easy to read. And this case study is directly taken from it. It's of Betsy. Her profile looks as such. She was a 60-year-old female at the time who had a stroke, which resulted in severe aphasia, which affected her ability to understand most language. She could really only say one word. She was unable to read, and she couldn't spell. And she and her husband, they had a jewelry store, and they were she was very excited about the jewelry store. She loved it. It was kind of her strong network of people, and she really loved showing off those interpersonal skills when she was at the jewelry store. Based upon her profile and using the Kaya resource, the yellow boxes indicate where the therapist felt she currently fell, where her skills fell at that time. What they did, and there's the partner dependent communicator section, what they did is they took their communication journey aphasia vocabulary file, which is based on the life participation approach to aphasia. They collaborated with some other therapists at GF Strong Rehab Center, and they designed this vocabulary file. The file contains a whole bunch of aphasia-friendly pages, and they are meant to be customized so that it is something that is reflective of that individual. Here's a picture of what the home screen looks like. Again, meant to be customized. Real pictures can be put on there. The intent is that customization is key. The life participation approach that was referred to in the previous slide is in the circle, the 5 circles. You will see that these are the 5 main elements that comprise the life participation approach. Enhancement of life participation, services are provided to everyone affected by aphasia. Services are provided at all stages. We need to have documented outcome measures, and we need to really consider and focus on that environmental and personal factors, with the inclusion on life participation, not focusing on those impairment-based goals. So looking at Betsy, her profile, taking her life participation approach into account, here is what the homepage initially looked like from the beginning, and this is what they needed to do to customize it. It went from a field of 12 to a field of 4 buttons. What it looked like from there is the therapist and the family worked together to make a very customized vocabulary file so that Betsy had access to the things that she needed to say. So that is just a general glance of what her various pages look like. You can see there isn't a standard 4 buttons on every single page. There's definitely real pictures that have been involved, things along those lines. Betsy had her vocabulary file for her jewelry store. And that's just like a general page on there because she just really loved that jewelry store, but showing how the layout can change, and also just those real photos make a big difference for some individuals. This ramp analogy, when we think about people who use wheelchairs that need a ramp to have successful access to a building, people with aphasia need communication ramps to have successful conversation. Communication ramps are tools that a communication partner would use to support conversation. Another analogy that Dr. Amy Dietz typically says is patients, our physical therapists don't wait for people to independently walk before they give them canes and wheelchairs. So why do we wait for people to have AAC access when they have aphasia? We're not waiting for them to recover everything. If we know there's a tool that helps assist, maybe that's where some of our focus should be. So just some general thoughts there. Or food for thought, as I should say. Our second case study is Brad. Brad's profile is he was in his 40s when he had his stroke. He has really pretty solid, good comprehension, but unfortunately poor expressive language. He uses gestures and facial expressions. He will answer yes and no verbally. He lives on his own. He definitely has some struggles and anger outbursts due to some of that frustration due to lack of conversation and communication opportunities, as well as the ability to produce those speech and language skills. And he's also a really big Cardinals fan. So we are going to take a look at this video of Brad and his therapy. He's had a couple of different vocabulary files. So you'll probably see some of this stuff kind of filter in between the vocab files, and I'll pop back on to talk more about it after I play this next video.
What have you been up to lately? It's been a little while since we've seen you. What have you been doing?
Tracy.
Yeah.
You've just been hanging out with Tracy?
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you had something start today, didn't you?
No.
But you didn't go?
No.
How come?
No,
Next week?
yeah,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it starts next week?
yeah.
Okay. And how have you been feeling?
Zero.
So you've had no pain lately?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's good. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I, Brittany, can you just let me know if you can hear me if I speak this way? Because I just have another video coming up. Okay, great. What I find interesting, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are, how did he relay how he was feeling? Did you feel that he was going to provide a number response when she asked? Or were you anticipating that he would say a word to describe how he was feeling? And the use of a Likert scale, right? Yeah, it's just fascinating. So it's like sometimes the things that we think we might take off of a communication system, we might need to leave on there because we're not sure how that person's going to interpret the use or how to use that specific thing. I never would have guessed a number. I'm right along with you all. So I just find that video just fascinating in regards to how he utilized.
What have you been up to lately? Because it's been a while.
Let me skip this video. So here's another video clip. It was the same day, and I want you to think about what this might look like if he didn't have access to the talker.
Brad, what are you going to do this weekend?
Mom. And Dad. I want Mom and Dad.
So you're going to hang out with Mom and Dad?
Yeah.
Okay. What are you guys doing? So it looks like you're talking about shopping.
No.
Andy Axton, please call 3877. Andy Axton, please call 3877.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Is it in the...
So Brad, so I'm gonna focus here on I'm gonna skip to this next slide here. Do you think it would have been beneficial for Brad to have some sort of image of a map on his system to help with context clues? And I see your question there, Rachel, I'll get to you in a second in that comment box. But yeah, when we think about like what might be potentially helpful, let's take a look at what happened after the therapist and Brad worked this out.
Where you're wanting to go this weekend. Can you try it again for me? How do you tell me where you want to go? Mm-hmm.
I want to go to Hacienda. I want to go to Hacienda.
Yeah. With who? Who do you want to go with?
I want Mom. Yeah. I want Mom and Dad.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. That will be a fun time.
So what happened was Brad was actually using a couple of different vocabulary files, and they realized the place that Hacienda was located in a different vocab file. So they were using a combination of different vocab files to customize it to make it more reflective of things that are important to him. So he was able to indicate in some way, shape, or form that it wasn't there, and then they worked together to find where that location of that missing word, if you will, was located. So Brad would be, classified, if we were to, within this taxonomy between this partner dependent and independent communicator section as outlined by this purple box. Okay, so we're almost out of time here. Unfortunately, I'm going to skip the kind of the general information, and I want to highlight another way that someone has utilized this form. This is a real life therapy therapist that did this for me. She's working with an individual, and she indicated that before she started her AAC evaluation, or while she was doing her AAC evaluation, she noticed that the individual kind of displayed these types of skills and challenges. And then what she did is she customized a vocabulary file, and I know I'm going fast, I just want to be mindful of time. She customized a vocabulary file to help her communication partners facilitate or get information out. So her communication partner might navigate to this page and say, okay, Sarah, was it a function? And she might shake her head yes or no. Okay, is it a color? Yes. Okay, the communication partner touches color. So it really heavily depends on communication partner training, but this is what we do with all therapy, regardless if it's for someone who has or doesn't have aphasia. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to customize vocabulary files to make it reflective of the needs and wants of that specific individual. After she had access to an AAC system, the therapist said that she moved into this independent communicator because she had access to the system, and that voice output really assisted her ability to become independent for what that meant to that individual. So the importance of customization can take many, many different shapes and forms, and how you get access to customization is by asking care providers, family members, people who know that individual, information about the person who might be using the system or a system. We might want to, apparently my IT thinks it's time for that to happen. I'll close that out. Thinking about the importance of that customization, we want to make sure that we're involving others right from the beginning, so we're not waiting until the end, plopping a device potentially in front of them and saying, here you go. If we start at the beginning and incorporate those from the start, we definitely would have a more comprehensive team approach. So to wrap up, if you have time and you want, this would be great, one thing you learned or one thing you want to learn more about or one thing you are going to do after tonight's presentation, feel free to chat that into the window. We greatly appreciate your time and joining us this evening. And then from the objectives and a wrap up, we know that research supports the use of AAC in aphasia treatment. We know that there are similar strategies that can be used with both low and high-tech AAC. And when we think about the use of high-tech AAC, some of the offers or added benefits that it offers are those voice output for greater engagement, dynamic pages for customizations, and a variety of features to support the therapy strategies that work best for that individual. We also know that overall AAC can increase independence, and communication partner training is definitely essential. So if there's any questions or comments, I'm more than happy to stay on for a couple minutes after. I will also pop up my email information onto this slide, and feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions, comments, anything along those lines. That would be more than welcome to receive that communication from you. And then last but not least, there's some information about PRC-Saltillo. Thanks for all your comments in the comment window. This is great. I really appreciate it. And then we have our resources and references there. All right. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. Have a good evening. Thanks for your time. Enjoy the night.